I can't tell you the amount of times I've been in a conversation and I've said something, an anecdote or quote, something I remembered about something, some obscure fact or whatever, that if you would have asked me point blank, I wouldn't have been able to tell you. But it came to me because my subconscious welled up, something I had read in a book, and it came out naturally and organically. That's what reading books does fundamentally. It literally changes who you are because all the ideas, subconsciously, you create a neural network that connects, and the more knowledge, the more information you take in, the more you make those synaptic connections in your brain that come out when you least expect it, that come out in everyday life when you don't even realize it's coming out because of the decisions you're making, because of you're understanding things better, because you're understanding people better, because maybe you read about psychology, or maybe you read about history, and so you know why some things may happen and history tends to repeat itself, and you have more information in regards to that, so you make better decisions, or you clearly see why that was a mistake, or that is probably going to be a mistake. There are so many examples where reading books and building that knowledge at the subconscious deep level can improve your life for the better. And it's a lot of times not something you can even quantify. And that's why in this video, I'm gonna try to give you 5 examples of how reading books can literally change your life, that make you a more interesting person. Because fundamentally, that's what we all wanna be. We wanna be more interesting to people so we can better persuade them, so we can attract a better mate, and so we can just have better relationships. Because when people appreciate your intellect and they appreciate you being around, that's how you develop long-term relationships. Okay, so number 1 is you become a person that uses quotes. In conversation, like I mentioned in the intro, things will come up subconsciously. It'll be a quote, it'll be a fact about a company. Those come up for me all the time, about Apple, about Google, about Ford, about old companies from old books I've read. It's just amazing how these little factoids that are in a book that you read that, again, like if you were asked, you wouldn't even be able to recall probably. Sometimes you could, but a lot of times it's at such a subconscious level that you don't even remember where you read it or why it's there, but it's there, and it comes out naturally through conversation. That is a huge, huge benefit for having conversations with people you just meet, especially if you're trying to persuade people or impress people or get them to like you. And you can throw out those little quips, those little factoids. It's really cool. Now, the best strategy to use this is actually when you're listening, and you can throw those out there here and there. I don't recommend, especially with new people, to have long conversations where you're just talking a lot and where you're maybe, going off on some point or some history factoid or whatever. You got to keep it very tight, very succinct, because people generally don't like to listen. They like to talk, and they like to talk about themselves, and they like to talk about things that they like to talk about and are interested in. And so when you're listening and you're being engaging, and head tilt is proven to be better for listening and to make people feel like you're listening to them more, and nods and yes, interesting, things like that. Give those little things out so often, not all the time, because you have to have space for them to be able to talk and not feel like they're being interrupted. But you throw those out there, and then you might every so often say, oh yeah, you know what, that reminds me, that sounds like I read this book this one time. It was this, that, whatever. Is that what you're talking about? Or you throw out a supporting point that supports what they're saying. It makes them feel important. It makes them feel knowledgeable. I'm telling you, for improving your relationships in networking and business, this stuff is game changer. Game changer. And that is why it's the number 1 reason why you should be wanting to read more books. The number 2 benefit to reading books that I've found, and this is true of fiction, nonfiction, self-help, all the genres. If you're reading even a slightly varied mix of books, you're going to better understand people, and you're going to better understand yourself. I can't really quantify why this is. Now, obviously, I've read a lot of books on philosophy and psychology, and so that's obviously helped me. But even fiction I've read, because fiction draws from real life and it draws from relationships, and the best stories are ones we can relate to and that we understand, you learn so much about the human animal, and you can apply that knowledge to yourself and your relationships. You'll see commonalities for mistakes that your friends have made, that you've made maybe. There are so many examples of how even reading something like fiction can literally help you build those neural networks and make you a more intelligent, wise, and worldly person that is more self-aware of him or herself and the people around you. Now, the next point goes very closely with number 1 and number 2, but I found that you become better at asking questions, and you also become a better listener. Maybe just the act of reading and keeping you engaged and not really talking is itself a practice, right? Because what you see with a lot of people in our modern world is they love to gab, and people, most of the time what they're doing, even if you're talking, they're waiting for their turn to throw something in. People just love to talk. They do, right? And I know this is kind of ironic as I'm talking to a camera, right? But when I'm in conversations with people, I actually talk less than most other people. I tend to listen more, and I tend to balance it. The more comfortable I am, I'll talk more because I've already established a relationship or whatever. But in general, I'm always trying to include other people in the conversation. And so even if I feel like I'm dominating the conversation and I'm kind of directing it, well, I'm going to constantly find ways to include people by asking them questions, by relating to the thing I'm saying and getting them involved. And so I found that reading books and becoming more knowledgeable and, again, more self-aware, it helps you ask more questions. It helps you be more interested in people. It helps you listen better. And this is a fundamental life skill, and it is one that we need more of, and it is one that's going to be even more appreciated in our world of disconnectedness and people just becoming really bad at listening. People just aren't good listeners. So one of the last benefits of reading, at least for this video, because there's a lot of benefits of reading, but some of the ones I like to highlight in this video is your curiosity muscle. The more you read, the more you tend to want to read, and the more you tend to want to know about the world, about people, about stories. You become more interested in all these things. And even if you're reading one topic primarily, maybe if you're reading a lot of fiction, well, it's not that hard to then start reading some nonfiction, some business, some marketing books, some history books, things like that. And that's actually something I highly recommend. And like, let's say you're reading this and you're into fiction, you're into nonfiction, or you're into romance novels or whatever it is, I highly, highly recommend branching out. Like, read some sci-fi, read some romance if you've never read that, read some self-help, read some history, read some historical fiction. Wilbur Smith is actually an author I started with. Just find these different genres and maybe just find the top-rated book in that genre or a very popular book in that genre and open up your horizons a little bit. When you do that, it's going to just do a lot for you. It's going to do a lot of things this video talks about, but it's also maybe opening a door to an entirely new world of reading that you haven't even got into yet, which is awesome and super exciting. And so I hope this video is useful, guys. We have a couple books here. Obviously, these are some recommendations. These are all I've read and I think are super useful. But if you have any book recommendations below about books that have changed your life, or tips for reading, or other benefits that you find for reading in your life, maybe it's like mindfulness and meditation, because I mean, reading really is a form of meditation when you're really absorbed in a story. I would also say a call to action. If you're not reading fiction, if you're the type that likes to read books for personal development, but you're not reading fiction, you are missing out on so much of these benefits. And I cannot harp on this enough. A common misconception is this idea that like fiction doesn't contribute, right? Or fiction doesn't build your awareness or your knowledge muscle. And that's completely and utterly wrong. It's wrong. In fact, a lot of things I've learned that have been most applicable to life, that have been most easy for me to understand, are stories. And that's because the human mind is designed to learn through stories. That storytelling is just built into our biology, which is why there's certain 3-act stories and there's a climax and ending, and most people like happy endings. It's why a lot of the storytelling is very formulaic, is because humans are used to hearing stories in a certain way, and we prefer hearing stories in a certain way. And so I highly recommend reading fiction if you haven't. I hope this video was useful. Like, comment, subscribe, slap the subscribe button, jab the thumbs up, do all those cool things, and stay tuned for the next video.